The Warriors are 500. They're 8-17 in their last 25 games, and all signs point to another mediocre season without major changes of any form. And the narrative is really confusing.
Um, Desperate trades or desperate, moves that deplete the future. Like there is a responsibility on allowing or keeping the franchise when in a good space and good spot.
On one hand, the Warriors don't seem desperate to make a change.
I hope there's not a misconception that we're not fighting and scrapping and hoping that we can do everything possible to keep this thing going.
And on the other, they're a team that desperately needs something to change in order to escape mediocrity.
All the Twitter fingers who's got deals that we need to make can kind of just shut up a little bit and let us figure this thing out.
In last night's win against the Timberwolves, that change was Steph Curry's minutes, and once again spamming the Curry high ball screen. So is the change the Warriors need just for Steph Curry to take over games? Let's review. When Steph has these big shooting games, he usually gets in rhythm relatively early. Early in the first, watch how Steph expertly fakes the screen by shifting towards the basket and then giving Edwards a little bump, only to come off this screen from TJD and let it fly. Now, the theme of today's video is Steph gets doubled. The Wolves tried their absolute hardest to keep the ball out of Steph's hands, but when the Warriors keep moving, they can easily exploit this. Let's watch how McDaniels and Gobert become entirely attached to Steph's dribbling as he moves here, which leaves Luis Santos wide open for this layup. These doubles are going to happen the entire game and are a big reason why Steph had such a productive night. Now, to illustrate to you just how effective the Steph Curry high pick and roll is, pay attention to the next three clips because they all start the exact same way. Looney is going to come set this nice high ball screen that he nicely re-angles in order to free Steph of McDaniels. Now, Gobert gets a really good contest, but that's an easy shot for the Golden Boy. Now, next is yet another high ball screen from Looney. And as we covered again and again on this channel, Steph always draws two off of these ball screens. McDaniel is hounding him. Gobert is stepping up to try and prevent him from taking an easy three. And provided that Steph can always make this pocket pass here and that the roller can always finish, it's usually a pretty easy bucket. Now, this time, it's, you guessed it again, another high ball screen from Looney. And this time it's Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels who opt to blitz him. Watch how they're picking him up at nearly half court and forcing him to dump this ball off. Now, the Warriors have completely emptied this strong side, which allows Looney to run into all of this space. But they forget about Steph Curry. Naz Reid is entirely preoccupied with maybe getting this defensive rebound, and McDaniels has retreated to GP2 on the left wing. Interestingly enough, this is a really good example of a lineup that would have absolutely zero scoring threat without Steph. We have GP2, Moody. We have Buddy Hield, who's been a decent three-point shooter this year, but still doesn't really provide any solo creation. And you could argue it would still even make sense for one of them to stay attached to Steph, but they don't. And I think if you just pause it right here, I think this is the most wide open we've seen Steph Curry ever. There's absolutely no one on him, and that's a guaranteed 3 points for Steph. I'm going to give you 2 seconds to guess what happens in this next possession. It's a double team on Steph Curry. Basically, as soon as he approaches the three-point line, both Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid are going to immediately double and completely ignore Buddy Hield, who again is completely wide open in this corner. Now, Buddy Hield's a very dangerous shooter to leave completely wide open, but when you have Steph Curry in transition, defenders usually panic, and especially when they are taught to send these doubles, the result is wide open shooters, and that's another three. Now, once again, let's see how the Wolves sell out for Steph. Now, Buddy's posted up in this weak side corner. It looks like the Warriors are going to try and get Steph free off of this pin down from Looney. Now, what happens off of it? You guessed it. Again, another double. Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker trying to get the ball out of Steph's hands. Steph immediately recognizes this, and pay attention to how, because of this double team, Looney is relatively unimpeded in all of this space, which means that DiVincenzo has to split the difference between Buddy, who's lifting up into this wing, and Looney, who's crashing towards the basket. And because Steph is able to whip it to Buddy enough, Buddy gets a relatively uncontested 3. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on these next 2 clips because it's basically the same story. Steph always draws double teams, so no matter who sets this high ball screen in these clips, it's GP2. And no matter how high you set these ball screens, you can virtually guarantee a downhill roller and some sort of personnel advantage. Again, it really doesn't matter. Look how high they're setting these screens and look how high they're hounding him, yet they get pretty much wide open shots for GP2 both times. And what happens when Steph decides to do it himself? Let's look. Luis Santos setting a high ball screen. We're at half court. And this time Steph is going to opt to take it all the way himself. Now, let's watch Julius Randle. He kind of begins to stutter step around the 3-point line. It looks like he's trying to prevent a Curry 3. But this ultimately actually allows him to get blown by and allows Steph to just get a completely wide open layup. I think if we can just stop the clip right here, this is the power of Steph Curry's gravity, is all of this space in the interior. Even as the Wolves have been hounding him all night, doubling him, blitzing him, he's still able to find shots with no defenders within 10 feet because of the 3-point threat and because of the high ball screen. Now, the Warriors have always been a team of fun sets, and they ran a really fun action, what looks like a blind pig, to close the game out. Now, in blind pig actions, your goal is usually to take advantage of any defender that is doing heavy ball denial on their man. In this case, Ant has his back to the rest of the court and is denying Steph from getting the ball and denying Steph from the rest of this action. Now, in order to alleviate this pressure and ball denial, the ball handler, in this case, Wiggins, is going to find his way inside and try and pass to a big. In this case, it's Kevon Looney. And the big in blind pig actions usually steps up to the pinch post, which is like the empty weak side elbow, and is going to try and get the ball to a guard who is running downhill, usually towards the basket. In this case, he's able to get the ball and set this screen for Steph Curry, and Steph uses that screen to find a relatively wide open 3. It's a beautiful set to relieve pressure on Steph, to counter that denial, and it's a good 3 for Steph, who's wide open. Now, while the last dagger of the game was the coldest, let's pause here and watch how, as the ball is in the air, he's looking at these 2 guys talking trash the whole game. A lot can also be attributed to Naz Reid, who completely lost himself in space as the greatest shooter of all time was open in a corner. But I think if the win showed anything, it's that Steph, who's having a really insane shooting stretch, is still the most elite offensive engine in terms of generating space and offensive opportunities for his team. But is that enough in 2025? Can the Warriors spam high ball screen actions for 4 quarters every night? Do they have the shooters and finishers to take advantage of this gravity he generates? Well, yes, Steph can still tighten his laces and do it himself. Can he do it every night? If the Warriors' record is any indication, the answer is probably not. Let us know if you agree. Thanks for watching.